And so I don't know what your life is like right now. I don't know what season that you're in right now, what you're dealing with. But I want you to know this morning as we jump into this that I have good news for you. And the good news is hope is here. It's almost like you've been waiting for something, right? Waiting for somebody at the door. Have you ever been like that, where you're waiting for somebody, the anticipation of them getting to your house? I remember growing up, and I had an older cousin. His name was Greg. And every time that we went to my grandma's house after church on Sunday, we always hoped and prayed that Greg was there. And when we arrived, we'd go, "Greg is here!" And it was a joy to be able to spend time with him. And he was older, and soon he started dating a girl, and he stopped coming, and Greg wasn't there anymore. He was at his girlfriend's house. I remember my kids when they were little and they would have a sleepover or their first birthday party. Guess what they would do? They would go to the door or the window and watch for their friend to get there, right? And they would go, "Hey, Charlotte's here. The party can start," right? And it was so much fun to see their excitement as they anticipated a kind of a hope that they would come and be a part of their party. I've dropped off my girls at a place where they babysit, and there's 2 little kids there. And almost every single time that I've dropped off Kaylee or Libby or Kylie, guess what those 2 little kids are doing? They're standing by the door or by the window looking. "Kylie's here! Now we can have fun," right? And I wonder sometimes, something or someone is here and we don't recognize it. When Carrie and I were young and we were serving in our first ministry in Kansas at a small town, and we were living in a parsonage. Remember those things that the church would buy? And it wasn't like really, really nice, right? And so we had this little bitty house, and it was the middle of the afternoon, and we were getting ready to go do something. And if you came into our house, the front door opened into the living room, and then it opened into the kitchen, dining room, and immediately right there was a hallway. As you walk down the hallway, the first room on the right was the bathroom. And so you could be in the bathroom and looking at the mirror, and you could see the living room. And this is important for me to tell you this, okay? And so Carrie had already gotten ready, and she left the bathroom. I went in, I took a shower, and I'm standing in this little bitty bathroom looking at the mirror in all my glory, all right? Because, we didn't have kids. I didn't need to shut the door, all right? And I'm doing my thing, and I'm combing my hair, and yes, I had hair back then. And it was like a scene out of a scary movie, right? Where all of a sudden, because in the mirror you could look and you could see our living room, and the lights weren't on. It was kind of dark, and I'd been getting ready, and I never noticed it, but all of a sudden I look up, and there's this person, this face, this body in the mirror. And I jump, and I look, and it's one of our high school kids. He had just came in and was standing in the living room looking at me. I'm like, "Hey, Josh, what's going on?" Right? And I yell back, "Hey, Carrie, Josh is here." And Josh taught us that no matter what time of day it is, it's important to lock your doors. Right? I did not even notice him. I didn't even recognize him. And sometimes something or someone is here and we don't recognize it. And it makes me wonder, will we recognize hope when it's present? Sometimes we don't embrace right in front of us, even though it's exactly what we need, because we're still looking behind us. Or perhaps we're looking in the mirror. We're still focused on the past or something that happened yesterday. And here's the problem with that. It limits our ability to see hope. And so this morning I want to ask you, what are you looking for? And will you recognize hope when it appears? Joe did an excellent job with his communion meditation. Do you realize that you have hope right now? And will you recognize it? Will you welcome it in? Will you trust it? Hope can be found. And this is what we're going to talk about for the next several weeks. Hope can be found in my everyday circumstances. We want to apply this idea that hope can be found to our everyday life, our everyday circumstances. We want that. We need this. And sometimes we're in that good zone of life where we have different areas of our life that are going really, really well. Like our family life, our marriage could be going smoothly. Our relationship with our teenage kids are at an all-time high. But all of a sudden, in this area of our job, things are unstable. And all of a sudden, we start to lose hope in that area. And all of a sudden, that begins to affect these other areas. And Jesus wants to come in and give us hope in all of our phases of our life. And so how do we bring that area that's out of control under the umbrella of Christ so that He can control it, so that we can live a life full of hope, peace, security, and joy? Hope can be found also during my times of crisis. And we'll talk more about that next week. Hope can be found also through me that others need hope. And we'll talk about that in the weeks to come. You and I have the ability to give hope to somebody. But if we can't have hope in our everyday circumstances or even hope in our crisis, how in the world is God going to use us to be a pillar of hope to people around us? And that's how we want to end this thing. And so what are my everyday circumstances that we want to talk about today? What are my everyday circumstances in my life where hope can be found in my everyday circumstances? What are my everyday circumstances? Well, here's the first one, is my relationships. Do you realize that the majority of your interaction are through what? Relationships with people. All right, your spouse, your husband, your wife, your children, your friends. Or maybe it was your friends that you used to be friends with, but now you're not. And all of a sudden, you have to have this hope. You have to have this hope to come in and to secure that so that other areas of your life don't begin to spin out of control. Maybe your everyday circumstances is your job. Job, task, to-do list, right? Everything's going well at home, but the job is not working well. They changed management at the top. It's not as peaceful. It's not as fun. Or maybe you look at it and you go, a to-do list? Yeah, a to-do list. What I've noticed about a to-do list is that it can rob me of my hope because it sits there and it stares at me, and I got this idea that the longer I ignore it, it'll go away, right? But it doesn't. And I even have a to-do list at home that I have on my house and things I need to do around the house and for my daughters. When I began to lose my hair, it wasn't like one day I woke up, took a shower, and I had a big ball of hair in my hand, right? It just grabbed. And to be honest with you, let me just tell you this. I'm really not bald. All right? I mean, and I'm not saying touch my head, okay? I don't want that. I don't want you rubbing my head. It's not some luck charm to make a wish. But if you were to run your hand through my hair, you would notice that there is hair there. All right, so it wasn't like all of a sudden one day I woke up and I was bald. It gradually happened. Did you know most of my adult life has been spent with 4 women. All right, living with them. Did you know women lose hair? A lot of it. They shed. All right, and the reason I know this, because on my to-do list they will come down and they will go, "Dad, our shower's not draining," and I'll put that off because if you're a dad of teenage daughters, you know where I'm going with this, right? And finally, it gets to the point where it's about ready to flood the house, and I walk up there with my tools, and I open it up, and I pull this thing out of the drain that looks like from another planet, and I about gag, right? That's not hope. Disgusting. All right? And so, how do we have hope in our everyday circumstances with our job, our task, our to-do list? We can also have hope in our everyday circumstances in my health, my well-being. Cleaning out a drain is not my well-being. It affects your mental state, right? Your physical state. How do you have hope in your everyday circumstances when all of a sudden your health is failing. Or perhaps someone that you know, a loved one, is battling a sickness or disease. Those are heavy, everyday circumstances. Let me just stop for just a second and have a side note with you. Let me just say this about our everyday circumstances. Sometimes we need to change our everyday circumstances. And guess what? We can do that, right? We can do that. We know most of the time in 20 plus years of ministry, when I sit down with people, they know exactly what they need to do to get back on track in life. But it's just so hard to do it, right? It's that to-do list that we want to stay away from. I'm not a big Jim Carrey fan, all right? But he had a movie out there called Bruce Almighty that I actually liked a little bit. And one of my favorite scenes in it, and if you know the movie, Bruce Nolan and Anchorman, he has this encounter with God, and God gives him all his powers. And so what Bruce does, which is played by Jim Carrey, he decides to give everybody what they want, right? That would be the best way to handle it as God. That doesn't work. One of my favorite scenes is this woman walking through the house, and she's talking to another woman, and she says, "I've lost 30 pounds on the Krispy Kreme diet." That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's not going to happen. All right, and sometimes in order to lose weight, you have to change your everyday circumstances. A couple of weeks ago, my family took a vacation to New Mexico. And to me, a vacation is pleasant. It's relaxing. My kids decided that every day we would hike, and it wasn't an easy hike. They were trying to bury me in the desert. My legs, my knees, my ankles, my hips, they ached all the time. And I said, what fun is this? And they still hurt today. And so I looked up this week, what causes joint pains? And guess what I found out? That part of the problem is carbonation. Guess what's in carbonation? Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper has carbonation. And the more water I drink and the less Dr. Pepper, I won't have knee problems. I won't have as much. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, I need to change my circumstances. I'm like, I don't want to, right? But sometimes we need to. We need to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things. And we can change our everyday circumstances, and there are times that we need to do it. And there are times when a brother or sister in Christ comes up to you out of love, and they tell that, and instead of rejecting it and getting mad at them, you ought to listen to them. I need to listen to that. So what is hope today? What is hope? And we're going to talk about two definitions here. Okay, let's explain what hope is and how to apply it to our lives as Christians. Here's the first definition, and this is where a lot of us get trapped in this, and this is where Satan wants us to stay with the hope. And the first definition, you could sum it up into just one word, and it is a wish. It's a wish. The strength of a person's desires. Does that make sense? Let me explain it to you like this. That when you go out and you plan a vacation, you spend the money, right? You make all the arrangements. You have a wish, a hope, a desire for what? That vacation to do what? To go smoothly. Awesome, right? Memories are going to be made. We're going to laugh about this. We're going to rejoice because this was the best bonding experience ever. Instead, what happens is the AC goes out in the car, right? The plane is late, right? All of a sudden, a kid is throwing up like 5 times in the car, and then everybody else is throwing up. And all of a sudden, you're like, this is the worst, because you had a desire. And so many times we place this in our life, and that is not exactly what hope is. Instead, what hope is, there's another definition, a greater definition, a different kind of hope, and here it is. It's a confident expectation. And you see this in the gospel. You see this in Jesus' teaching. When he talks about hope, he's talking about a confident expectation of something greater to happen. When Paul writes all his letters to the church and he talks about hope, he's talking about a confident expectation that's going to happen. Something that you can rely on, that you can take it to the bank. Joe talked about it this morning. And the definition is a confident expectation, the strength, listen to this, of God's faithfulness. That's what you can bank on. The faithfulness of God. Something that is already done, finished, completed. And when we begin to look at it through those lenses, it gives us a great security and this unshakable peace that this world can never take away from us. To live life, and as Jesus said, to the fullest. A confident expectation. Here's what hope is. Hope is a promise. When you look at it from a confident expectation, it is a promise from God. Because of God's what? Faithfulness. Because of God's faithfulness, it's a promise that cannot be taken away from you. People break promises, right? Ever had a person break a promise to you? Man, you guys are so good, man. Okay, just one. All right, Jack, I'm with you, buddy. All right, now we got two. Have you ever had somebody break a promise? I mean, I break promises every day. I broke a promise this morning. All right? I don't know what it is with me on Sunday morning when I get up out of bed and I'm tunnel vision. And I will always, 9 times out of 10, forget something to bring up here. And guess what I have to do? Text my wife, hey, babe, I forgot this again. And so last night we're sitting in our house and she's like, don't forget this. I won't, I promise. And here I was sitting in my office. I forgot to bring the creamer, right? And so I broke my promise this morning. And so we see that time and time again. But with God, God's faithfulness, He doesn't break His promises. And we can take it to the bank and this confident expectation that God has something great in store for us, because this promise is based on the faithfulness of God. In the craziness of our everyday circumstances, there is one thing that you can count on, that you can cling to and hold on to, and that is the faithfulness of God. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9 says, know therefore that the Lord your God is God. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. The faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love Him and keep His command to 1,000 generations. That's what I want to teach my kids. Today is Father's Day, right? I want to teach my kids to bank on that promise, on the faithfulness of God, so that generation after generation of Petersons can experience the faithfulness of God. But it's not easy. This world is not easy. Even when you bank on a confident expectation of God, things do not go your way, do they? Jesus said it. It's not easy. Jesus said in John 16, He said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Because in this world you will have trouble. Do you hear that? Jesus just said, you will have trouble. You will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. That's a promise. The faithfulness of God. Expectations, confident expectations. So where do we go with this? All right? And here's what I want to do this morning. I want you to turn to 1 Peter. We're going to be in 1 Peter this morning real quickly here. And we're just going to apply some biblical principles to this text, to this confident expectation that God's faithfulness is a promise that no matter what our everyday circumstances are in life, God can overcome and give us hope. All right, we can find this steadfast hope. Peter writes this letter to Christians spread out in all kinds of different regions. And they were going through everyday circumstances. And it wasn't like the AC went out at the house or the refrigerator is on the blitz again, right? These people were actually being persecuted. They were suffering. They were going through hard times. They were suffering. People were disowning them. Their family was disowning them. And Peter writes this letter and says, hey, don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. You have a confident expectation of the faithfulness of God. And so we're going to jump into this. 1 Peter chapter 1. And we're going to skip down to verse 3. We're going to start there. Verse 3, listen to this. Listen to how Peter starts this. Praise be to God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. I love that. Notice how Peter starts this. Notice his mindset. He starts with praise, right? He starts with a thank you, right? Our minds are trained to start in our everyday circumstances, to start out with the worst thing that is happening to me at this moment. Have you ever noticed that? And Peter is stopping for a moment and said, you know what? Let's start with a different perspective. Let's start with a different viewpoint. Let's start with praise. Let's start with thankfulness. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Then he goes on and says this, in his great mercy, he has given us a what? A new birth. A new birth. Peter is reminding us that what has been given to us is a new birth, a new family. Notice he doesn't start with an individual or a group of people. He is talking about this togetherness that God wants us to have. Sometimes when we focus on our circumstances, it's easy to forget who we are and where we come from. As a matter of fact, it's easy to start to identify ourselves with the circumstances, our everyday circumstances, or to tie ourselves to that problem, isn't it? And Peter is just reminding us that we can't forget who we are and where we're coming from. In his great mercy, he says, he has given us a new birth into, listen, a living hope. A living hope. Not a dead, not a used one, not one that expired, but a living hope right now. Not in the past, but something that is done. Not that it's done, it is an active hope. It's moving with us every day. It goes with us in our everyday circumstances into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. There it is, right? We talked about that this morning. Joe did. Into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. This isn't a one-time celebration, right? This isn't Easter just once a year. This is a celebration, a hope that brings hope every day because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And into an inheritance. What is an inheritance? What is it? Yeah, something that you're going to get, something that you were going to receive. It's something that you probably maybe not even earned on your own. It's an inheritance. And sometimes, most of the time, when we talk about an inheritance, it's something good, right? It's something that we look forward to. It's something that is given on to our kids. But we have a Father. And since we are children of God, we have a Father that is going to give us a greater inheritance than we can ever imagine, right? And into an inheritance that can never, listen to this, perish, spoil, or fade. Do you know what your everyday circumstances, and I don't know what you're dealing with today, but you know what your everyday circumstances today, they will perish. They will spoil. How many of you have ever went to a restaurant, your favorite restaurant, you take home, one of the great joys of spending lots of money at a restaurant is the leftovers, right? And you take them home and you put them in your fridge and all of a sudden you forgot about it. And when you remember it, you go to it and you pull it out and it's got a weird little smell, but you're like, oh, I don't want to pass this up, right? And you take a little bite and it's like tangier than it was before and you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't eat this, right? And you throw it away and you're like, oh, I can't believe I forgot about it. It's spoiled. Peter is reminding us that this will never spoil. It will never fade. Flash back in your life 10 years ago, maybe a year ago even. Remember the circumstances that were surrounding your life then and how they drove you crazy? And now you look at it a year later and it doesn't really matter. What happened to those things? You matured and they faded, right? Peter is telling us this inheritance will never do that. It will never fade. It will never perish. It will never spoil. He goes on to say this inheritance is kept in heaven for you. It is locked, it is sealed, it is completed for you. And this is where Peter begins to talk about a dual citizenship, right? You're flesh and blood, you're walking on this earth, your home is here, but guess what? You have a greater home. You have a place that is far more important in eternity with Christ than this home will ever be. And so many times I forget that. I dream of having like a lake house, or my family would want a beach house. I wouldn't want to be at a beach house, but they would want to be at a beach house. I dream about having a cabin in the mountains. That would be cool. You know, when I was down in Texas, I had some buddies. They called it a deer camp, and they went out and they bought this house out in the middle of nowhere, and they would go out and do their guy things. Okay, all right. And I thought that's so cool. I would love to have a guy house, right? A deer camp. And I don't even hunt deer, but I'd still I'd call it deer camp, right? And it'd be so cool. And Peter is telling us, you know what? Yeah, you're walking on this earth, but you have a greater home. And I get so caught up in my circumstances in life that I forget about this. I forget about it. Sometimes I don't experience hope because I lock myself into my everyday circumstances and forget that there is something else waiting for me of far greater value than my everyday circumstances. And I want to be a man. I want to be a husband. I want to be a father. I want to be a son. I want to be a friend. That when people look at me, my life points to a greater cause than what is on this planet called heaven. King Solomon once told us, God has set eternity in our hearts. Have you ever allowed your everyday circumstances to rob you of that hope, of a confident expectation of God's faithfulness to take you home? I think for some of us, we are living in a time that everything is defined in this one moment that we live in life. Have you ever noticed that? In the society that we live in? And that simply isn't true. Life is more than that. Listen to else what Peter says in this verse. Who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed to you in the last time. What Peter is saying here is that there will be a day that you'll experience healing that will never go back to unhealthy. You will experience a wholeness that can never be broken apart again. That is why this hope isn't a wish, but it's a confident promise, a confident expectation of God's faithfulness. And then he rounds it out in verse 6. Listen to what he says. In all of this, your everyday circumstances, in all of this, greatly rejoice, though for now, for a little while, you may have to suffer grief and all kinds of trials. God is never caught off by surprise. He knows the pain that you go through. But we have to have this confident expectation of God's faithfulness to pull us through, even through the smallest, even through the biggest everyday circumstances. Skip down to verse 13, and Peter says this, therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, and he's not talking about drinking here, okay? He's not talking about having a party. Set your hope on a grace to be brought to you when Christ Jesus is revealed at his coming. As obedient children. Remember, we talked about obedience last week, right? A good dog is a obedient dog, right? A good Christian is a... Jesus said, if you love me, obey my commands. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance, but just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all that you do. Guess what? You can never earn holiness. You can never be holy. But through Jesus Christ you can be. Jesus Christ is the one that has allowed you to be holy. And so Peter is sitting here saying, be holy because Jesus has made you holy. So here's what we want to do this morning. What an incredible passage of hope that Peter unveils to those followers. And I pray and I hope that as you read it again, and I would encourage you throughout the week to take time to read what he writes in 1 Peter chapter 1. But this morning, I want to share with you what Pete Hickson says. He gives us some helpful truths about our everyday circumstances. Let's put a little application as you go into your life, into your week this week, and you have your everyday circumstances. Here's what I want you to remember about your everyday circumstances so that you don't lose hope, so that you cling to the confident expectation of God's faithfulness, of his promise. My everyday circumstances can feel permanent, but they are temporary. Remember that. The sun will come up tomorrow. Sometimes the weight of your everyday circumstances seem like it will go on and on and on. Stop, breathe, give yourself time and space, work on you, react deliberately instead of impulsively, talk about it with a friend, and keep an open mind. Remember that they are temporary. Here's another thing. My everyday circumstances can feel like they define me, but they are not my identity. They can feel like they define me. There's moments where you will make a mistake. There's moments that you'll make a failure. There's moments when things are going bad and you feel like, man, this is defining who I am, and they're not. They're not. They will happen. This past year, if you watch NFL, and I know the NFL is really depressing anymore with all the political stuff and overpaid athletes and all the sports, all right? But I do find my way of breaking away and sometimes relaxing with it. And I was watching the playoffs, and the Chicago Bears spent all this money on Cody Parker. Now, I'm not a big Bears fan, all right? I'm a Chiefs fan. But anyway, they spent all this money on this kicker. And kickers are worthless, right? But there's a part of the game that comes down to it. And if you were a kicker in high school, I apologize. All right? Don't hold that against me. All right? But it came down to the last second. They were playing the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Bears actually, for the first time, they were really good, and they were expected to make a deep playoff push. And they come down, and it's a 43-yard field goal. And you probably know the story. It's actually called the double doinker, all right, because he kicks it, and it hits the cross right, and it falls down, and then hits the cross post, right? So it hits the goal post twice and still doesn't go in. And he misses it. And I mean, living in Chicago, and you just missed it, and you're out of the playoffs, everybody hated Cody Parker. And after the game, he had an amazing interview. And listen to what he says. Listen to what he says. You can't make this stuff up, Parker says. I feel terrible. I let the team down. That's on me. I have to own it. I have to be a man. Unfortunately, that's the way it went today. I thought I hit a great ball and was trying to play the win, but I missed it. And there's really no answer to it. I didn't make it. I take that loss. It's on me. The sun is going to shine tomorrow, but unfortunately, this one's going to sting a little bit. And then he went on to say, guess what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home to a wife that loves me and kids that still look up to me. And I'm going to be their dad. And I thought to myself as I read that post interview, I said, this is it, right? So many times in our life, my everyday circumstances feel like they define me, but it's not my identity. And that's exactly what Cody Parker, even though he was paid to make a kick, he didn't make that kick. And he understood that it's still just a game, that he had a greater responsibility in his life called his family. And he put that stake on. My everyday circumstances, here's the next one, can feel like they control me, but they don't. When you realize that God's love for you is so strong that there is nothing you can do to lessen that, it changes everything. And some people might go, oh, wait a minute, Lance. Wait a minute. You can't tell people that. Because they'll go out and they'll be crazy. They'll go do crazy stuff. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that. The truth is, when I see someone whose love for me is that strong, that secure, my initial reaction isn't to go spit in their face. It's to love them. My reaction is to look at Jesus and go, what? Really? Yeah, because Jesus can handle my everyday circumstances. Here's the last one. My everyday circumstances matter, but my life is the sum total of all my days. Right? You'll have bad moments. You'll make mistakes. All right? But the rest of your life matters how you live it to God. Right? I remember when I was trying to teach Libby how to ride a bicycle. And we were in Texas at the time, and we took her over to a park that was beside our house, and they had this great big concrete pad. And I don't know why I did this. There's a lot of stuff that I look back as a father, as a husband, I go, I don't know why I did this. But I took our lab, and we had a yellow lab. Her name was Daisy, and when you would let her loose, she was like another animal, right? You guys have been around labs. They're crazy. And so Libby is just learning how to ride this bike, and she's making this big circle. And I thought, I looked around the park, nobody was here, so I unleashed Daisy. And you know what that dog did? She made a beeline and took Libby out. I mean, just boom, exploded, right? And she goes and she cracks her chin on the concrete, big old gash, blood everywhere. We take her to the ER, and we're sitting in the ER, and she goes, "I'm never riding a bike again," right? Which I would be like, yeah, because there's crazy dogs running around out there, right? After a couple of days, after the pain was gone and the memory faded, we took her back outside, and she was like, "I'm still not riding it." And I remember having this conversation saying, "Do you want to be 80 years old and not know how to ride a bike?" Right? And so she got back on, and she pedaled. She didn't let that one moment sum up her life. And so many times in our everyday circumstances, we let that one moment sum up who we are. I want to end with this in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. I love this passage, and I think Peter, as he's talking to the people spread out who are being persecuted and suffering, listen to what he says. Humble yourselves. Humble yourselves. Man, that's a term that's lost in today's society, isn't it? I was out at junior high camp this week, and then some of our staff that's working with our kids, they came up to me, and these were 7th and 8th graders, right? Yeah, that's right. All right. And they came up to me and they said, "There's one kid here," thank goodness he wasn't from our church. "There's one kid here that said they overheard him say he was the best looking boy here." And so I was like, "Really?" And I had him point him out to me. And so I love having these engagement with kids that think they're really good. And so I walk over there, all right? I walk over there. He's with a group of boys from other churches, and I put my arm around him. I'm just chatting him up, and I asked the guy. I said his name. He was like, "Yeah, that's me." And I said, "So I hear that you're the best looking boy here." And I thought he would be like, "Oh, where'd you hear that?" You know, and he looks at me and he sticks his chest and goes, "I think I'm the most sexiest person here." And I'm looking at him and I'm like, "You're 12. You're not sexy. You're 12, right?" Whatever. 14, 12, whatever his age is. What's he doing at junior high camp, man? Anyway, I was just like blown away by his arrogance, right? Humbleness. Listen to what he says. Humble yourselves, therefore, and I love this, under God's mighty hand. Under God's mighty hand. Today is Father's Day, and I know that this sermon has little to do with fathers to a degree. But you know what? I've been around, and I was able to grow up under a mighty hand. I was able to grow up with a dad who placed me in God's mighty hand. In order for me to get to God's mighty hand, I had to be under my dad's mighty hand. And I remember sitting, and there was times that I would sit and I would look at my dad's hand, and they were massive. His fingers were huge compared to mine. And I would run my hand around his fingers and his hand, and they were dirty because he was a welder and he worked hard for his family, and they were calloused. And I would put my hand in his hand, and you know where I did that at? I did that in the church pew at churches. Because my dad knew what it meant to lead his family. He wanted to put his family under the mighty hand of God. And even as a young kid, as I looked at his hand and realized, and I was so intimidated by his hand, by the time I was a teenager, I was willing to challenge him on this, and he never wavered. He continued to stay fast in the mighty hand of his to make sure that I stayed in contact with God. And there is so many times, men, we need to introduce our families to the mighty hand of God. Because here's the importance of that. Listen to what he says. Under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Due time. Casting all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. I can have hope today because God cares for me. I can have hope here because God cares for me. This morning, as we close, I just want to do a little thing with you real quickly. I want you to enlighten me for a moment, because there are so many things. Today, everything might be brilliant. The sun is shining, but tomorrow the storms could come in. And do you have the hope? Do you have the confident expectation of what God is giving you? A promise, a faithfulness of God. And so this morning, as you sit there in the pew, I just want you to close your eyes, put your hands on your knees, palms up. I just want you to take a deep breath. Breathe in. And before you exhale, ask God to lead you. Spirit, lead me. Exhale. Breathe in. Spirit, lead me. Breathe out. Breathe in. God's Holy Spirit, lead me. Breathe out. God, I come to you right now in prayer. And may we always, as followers of Jesus Christ, cling to this confident expectation of your faithfulness, of a home greater than here. And all God's people said.